What historical figure would you 100% simp for? The Empress Theodora. Started as, basically a stripper and possible prostitute, ends up Empress of the Eastern Roman Empire, speaks up and protects women and religious minorities, and keeps her brilliant husband from going on tilt. So awesome a fake history was published accusing her of gangbangs in the Hagia Sophia and fucking demons and animals, just to tarnish her memory. It really strikes me how, when you go looking for it, there is a half-ton of minority representation in the ancient world. Across myth and history are trans people, a wide variety of races, every sexual and romantic minority under the sun, and stories of people from the humblest origins becoming heroes of history. And then people say it's all old white men. It's so much more than that. Not many people know this, but Ben was shredded when he was a young adult. He worked at a printing press and was constantly lifting heavy shit, and swam recreationally all the time. He was built like a fullback. He was also known to be a fuck machine. Here's a real quote of his. Because in every animal that walks upright, the deficiency of the fluids that fill the muscles appears first in the highest part, the face first grows lank and wrinkled, then the neck, then the breast and arms, the lower parts continuing to the last as plump as ever. TLDR, Ben was yoked and wasn't afraid to bang grannies. Just want to throw Mary Edwards Walker's hat onto the ring. She was a surgeon in the U.S. Civil War and the only woman to ever receive a U.S. Medal of Honor. They tried to rescind it in the 1910s, but she was like fuck off ... If you want it back, come pry it off me, and wore it pinned to her jacket every day for the rest of her life. She was also a founder of women's dress reform. Basically, she thought dresses were bullshit and insisted on wearing pants. One more picture because this old lady is such a badass and I love her. In Celtic culture, a warrior or hunter who harmed a hare would be cursed by the gods. For such a violent person to harm such a beautiful creature was not allowed, and they would lose all their courage. It's said before her first battle with the Romans she pulled a hare from under her skirt and let it loose in the direction of the Roman warriors. Her rebellion was a taxing time for the Romans, who later on changed their idea of Roman conquest of the Britain. Cultural expansion, not conquest. Boudica may not have freed her people, but the Romans lost their nerve in terms of conquest and took the slower, safer approach. Also his son, Theodore Roosevelt Jr. He was the only general to land at D-Day, and this was after he was denied permission twice and only was allowed because he annoyed his superior enough. When he landed, it turned out that they were in the wrong location. One of his junior officers asked what they should do and he famously responded, "We'll start the war from here." For the rest of the invasion he stayed on the beach, directing his troops under artillery and machine gun fire. He did all of this with a heart condition and severe arthritis. At 52. Oscar Wilde. Let me tell you how charming Oscar Wilde was. He was seeing Lord Alfred Douglas, whose father, the Marquess of Queensberry, was so angry with the world in general as to be practically rabid. Queensberry threatened to shoot the Home Secretary for seeing his other son, literally prowled around his hotel with a pistol, wrote to Alfred that when he first looked at him in his crib he was filled with hatred and disgust, and picked a fight with the entire country of Scotland. On 2 separate occasions, Queensberry spotted Wilde and Douglas dining together at a restaurant and went up to their table for the express purpose of creating one of the ugly, unhinged public scenes that he so loved. Both times, Wilde was so charming that Queensberry ended up sitting, talking, and laughing with them. He eventually did take Wilde down, but only once he'd learned to avoid engaging with him directly, because even his notorious temper was no match for Wilde's charm. Mary Seacole, mixed-race woman who, on her own volition, sailed to Crimea during the Crimean War to be a nurse and set up a convalescent home. This was after she was rejected by Florence Nightingale for being not white. She was beloved by the soldiers she cared for, who called her Mother Seacole or just Mother. She was stern, but nurturing, and tough as hell. So, a strong, enterprising, confident, rule-breaking maternal figure who's really good at aftercare. Add some leather and you have a world-class dominant. If you're looking for new people to add to your simp roster, You might like Mary Edwards Walker, Civil War surgeon and only woman to receive the Medal of Honor. They tried to rescind it in the 1910s and she basically told them to fuck off and wore it pinned to her jacket until she died. Also, she thought women's clothing was objectively ridiculous and spent a huge chunk of her time being arrested for dressing like a man. A judge in her town got so tired of throwing out cases against her, he ordered the cops to never arrest her again. Jesus, for sure, dude had 12 friends while in his 30s, so you know he was friendly and personable. He was a carpenter and the fact that they mention it means he had to be a good one. Due to the manual labor, yeah, I'll ever see a Catholic crucifix. My boy is shredded. He's also not real quick to anger, but when some merchants got him riled up, he braided the whip and went back to beat their asses. Then we have the fact that his best girlfriend was a hoe. Iconic. Lastly, we have the story of him going to a village, seeing a naked dude and immediately being like, "I'm gonna have dinner with you," then spends the night with said naked man and leaves in the morning after they basically swapped outfits. If I was a teenager, Rosa Shanina. If you all don't know her, she was 19 years old when she became sniper in the Russian army, who at one point wrote a letter to Stalin demanding to be sent to the front. She's credited with killing 59 Nazi soldiers. As I am now, Charlotte Corday. She was an assassin at 25 when she assassinated French revolutionary politician Jean-Paul Marat. She lied her way to get close to him and then stabbed him in the face in his bath. If you haven't guessed, I am attracted to dangerous women. Man, this can be a long list for me. Lol. Let's see. Julius Caesar, the founding fathers, Ulysses S. Grant, Dwight D. Eisenhower, Theodore Roosevelt. I can list more that I'd simp for, but I think that's enough. I think within that group, recognizing their flaws and acknowledging the bad shit that a lot of them did, there's a lot of traits, characteristics that if learned and practiced, can produce very competent, even great leaders, which I believe are lacking these days. Genius tacticians, very astute and shrewd diplomats, genius-level foresight, God-tier leadership, the ability to work and collaborate with others, especially enemies, people who disagreed with them, willingness to compromise, lead from the front, etc. etc. I'm a straight-ass dude, but probably Octavian Augustus Caesar. The man was fucking charismatic apparently, made himself a whole-ass emperor of goddamn Rome, a little cowardly in battle, but that's where homeboy Marcus Agrippa took over. Those two must have been fucking amazing friends. Cus Agrippa could have easily led the legion against Rome, but he never did any power plays and Octavian trusted the guy with his life and his army. I've seen a few simps for Julius Caesar, his uncle BTW, but Octavian was much more accomplished than Caesar ever was, at least in things not pertaining to warfare. Caesar is not known simply because his life was more exciting. Augustus, after defeating Mark Antony, led a pretty, relatively, boring life as emperor, made mad reforms to Rome, probably its best emperor. I simp for him hard. Augustus Caesar. Octavian. I've had a weird obsession with the guy since I learned about him in 8th grade. History says he killed Mark Antony and Cleopatra's son Caesarion himself when he realized the teenager was a threat to his reign. Edit. Slight mix-up. Caesarion was Julius Caesar's kid, not Mark Antony's. But turns out Octavian did kill a few of Mark Antony's children. Duchess Matilda of Tuscany. I've spent so much time simping for her in Crusader Kings, trying to marry her to my sons, trying to seduce her into an affair if someone else wins her hand in marriage first, or trying to seduce her into an affair even after she's married into my dynasty. Translating that into real-life simping just seems like it would be inevitable. Mansa Musa. The scene from Aladdin where he marches into the city with a giant lavish caravan is 100% inspired by the account of Musa's pilgrimage to Mecca. From his wiki page, Musa made his pilgrimage between 1324 and 1325 spanning 2,700 miles, 36, 37, 38. His procession reportedly included 60,000 men, all wearing brocade and Persian silk, including 12,000 slaves. 39, who each carried 1.8 kilograms, 4 pounds, of gold bars, and heralds dressed in silks, who bore gold staffs, organized horses, and handled bags. Musa provided all necessities for the procession, feeding the entire company of men and animals. 35. Those animals included 80 camels, which each carried 23 to 136 kilograms, 50 to 300 pounds, of gold dust. Musa gave the gold to the poor he met along his route. Musa not only gave to the cities he passed on the way to Mecca, including Cairo and Medina, but also traded gold for souvenirs. It was reported that he built a mosque every Friday. 40. Julie Dobini. She would abscond with men's wives, sometimes seduce the men too. One of her more famous exploits was one of her girlfriends got sent to a monastery to become a nun, because her parents didn't approve of their relationship. Julie also joined the monastery. She and her girlfriend faked the girlfriend's death and burned down the monastery. George McGovern. He was the Democratic nominee in the 1972 presidential election. He was very similar to Bernie Sanders in that he wanted to cut military spending and focus more on environmental and domestic issues, and also strengthen and fix the welfare state. He also wanted to implement a form of UB. Unfortunately, the voters that year decided to give Richard Nixon a 49-state re-election landslide. We all know how great that second term of Nixon's presidency was. It's a shame he wasn't elected, because we would have made progress on so many important issues instead of being behind on so many. Harald Hardrada, last Viking king of Norway, claimant to the thrones of England and Denmark, former mercenary badass who banged a Byzantine empress and was one of the most brilliant military commander of the Varangian Guard, killed by a coward with a bull for a king who got killed weeks later by a different Viking king called William. Maybe she wasn't the hottest, but whatever opinion we can have about her, she was an extraordinary woman considering times that she lived in. Edit. Wow. I see that angry 12-years-old are still down voting while seeing someone's personal opinion. Why ought her popla don't th include me? Edit 2. https://yahoo.co.uk/topics/articles/2019/05/03/Margaret Thatcher Public View 40 years. 40 years after Margaret Thatcher was first elected as Prime Minister, a new YouGov survey reveals that the Iron Lady is still seen as Britain's greatest post-war leader. Of the 14 PM since 1945, Thatcher tops the list with 21% of the vote, although second-placed Winston Churchill is within the margin of error on 19%. Tony Blair comes a distant third at 6%. More than 4 in 10 Brits, 44%, think Thatcher was a good or great prime minister, compared to 29% who think she was a poor or terrible one. Asked which qualities Britons feel Thatcher possessed, the most common answers are that she stuck to what she believed in, 60%, was strong, 58%, and decisive, 49%. The public also tend to take a positive view of Thatcher's legacy. 4 in 10, 39%, think her tenure was good for Britain, compared to 31% that think it was bad for the country. They also tend to think she left the country better off economically, 38%, versus 28% who think the opposite, more respected in the world, 49% versus 17%, and a place with better opportunities for women, 40% versus 11%. But let's not forget the Jew. Anybody that gives even a just criticism of the Jew is instantly labeled anti-Semite. The Jew cries louder than anybody else. If anybody criticizes him, you can tell the truth about any minority in America, but make a true observation about the Jew, and if it doesn't pat him on the back, then he uses his grip on the news media to label you anti-Semite. Malcolm X, https://www.goodreads.com/quotes/7304323. But let us not forget the Jew. Anybody that gives even. Lieutenant Commander Gerard Boudendroop commanded the relatively small British destroyer the Glowworm during WW2, while escorting ships to help counter the invasion of Norway. Glowworm became lost after having a man go overboard. Specifically, she was searching for the man, who was never found. Turning, she then made speed to catch up to the ships she was escorting. Spotting a pair of German destroyers, Roop ordered his ship to give chase. The German destroyers popped onto a rain squall. When Roop came through the squall, his ship was at near point-blank range to the Admiral Hipper heavy cruiser, a ship that dwarfed his destroyer. The cruiser was roughly 5 times the size of the destroyer. Rather than retreat, Roop ordered Glowworm to fight, laying smoke and using her small guns to rake the superstructure of Hipper, while also launching torpedoes. All the torpedoes missed, and before long Hipper had ranged in on the destroyer, and started to fire her massive 8-inch diameter guns at Glowworm. This wrecked the destroyer, knocking out all but one of its guns, causing the warning siren to get stuck on and giving a pitiful wail, and setting the destroyer ablaze. That's when Roop gave the fateful order, "Stand by to ram." Siren wailing, flames burning the length of the ship, and only her stern gun still firing. Glowworm charged out of the smoke screen she laid and made a beeline straight for Hipper. Hipper's captain, Helmut High, realized at the last minute what Roop was doing, but by then it was too late. Glowworm struck Hipper in the side just behind Hipper's first forward turret, and tore a 100-foot-long hole in her before breaking free. Water was lapping around the feet of the men at the stern gun when they fired one final parting shot, before Glowworm capsized and began to sink. High, captain of the Hipper, positioned his ship down current from the sinking, and stayed on station to pick up survivors for close to 2 hours. Sadly, Roop, who did survive the sinking, didn't last long. He was last seen helping other survivors onto the cargo netting the Germans had tossed over the side for the survivors to climb up. It's believed that, exhausted from the effort, and wounded himself, he slipped beneath the waves to a watery grave. High was greatly moved by Roop and Glowworm's actions that day, so moved that to honor the defiant little destroyer, he ordered the crew to place a memorial to the fight on Hipper, painting the name Glowworm on the forward turret, roughly at the same place the little ship had attacked the Goliath before it. He also went on to write a letter directly to the British High Command, commending Roop for his and his ship's bravery against such odds, and the willingness to go down fighting when they could have just as easily turned and ran. High went on to note to the Admiralty that it would be a great injustice if they could not find it in their hearts to award Roop with the highest award the British could give, for his bravery that day. He then sent this letter to them through the neutral Red Cross. After the war, based on High's testimony, Roop was awarded the Victoria Cross for the actions of Glowworm that day, with most every man on the crew being given some kind of other bravery award. https://upload.wikimedia.org/wikipedia/common/0/glowworm_and_flames.jpg. Glowworm in flames, having just rammed Hipper. The stern gun is all that's firing at this point, and the ship is taking on water. Photo taken on board Hipper by a German officer. Freyli de Zierik's daughter. She was the daughter of Erik the Red and sister of Leif Erikson, the Viking who is credited with the discovery of North America. One story says that when she and her brother's men were camped in North America, they were ambushed by natives. The man ran, but Freyli, who was many months pregnant, picked up the sword of a fallen Viking, cut open the front of her dress and beat her chest with the sword and screamed at the attackers, who fled in fear. I forget which names, but I remember 3 cases of notoriously promiscuous queens, who wouldn't simp for royalty. One was an Asian emperor, one was somewhere in Europe, and I recall one was some obscure queen into giving golden showers and boning common folk. I think that one was Scottish or Welsh, something like that. Alcibiades, the hoiest ho who ever hoed. He was a powerful general and politician during the Peloponnesian War who basically was so sexy that he could convince anyone to do absolutely ridiculous things. Like after the big war, which they lost, he managed to convince Athens to build the largest fleet ever to invade Sicily for the hell of it. And then after that goes to shit, he goes to work for Sparta.
Reddit.